right, good morning, everybody. I'm Amy Wyatt from the Untitled County Conservation Association, and we are very excited to have you at another Watershed Wednesday. I'm going to turn things over to Lydia to introduce our fantastic speaker for today.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to week 4 of our 2022 Watershed Wednesday series. I'm Lydia Brinkley, the Riparian Buffer Coordinator for the Upper Susquehanna Coalition. Watershed Wednesdays are hosted by the Upper Susquehanna Coalition and the Otsego County Conservation Association. These weekly sessions are taking the place of our Watershed Forum for 2022. We will be holding these sessions every Wednesday through November 2nd. The full schedule is posted on our website and Facebook page. You can also sign up for email announcements there on our website under the Watershed Wednesdays tab. These sessions are recorded, as Amy said, and can be accessed on the USC website at a later date. Our presenter today is Kevin Brown. Kevin was born and raised on a dairy farm in Bradford County and then went to Alfred State College. Through his previous jobs, Kevin has worked to meet the feed and crop needs of farmers in northern Pennsylvania and southern New York. After 22 years, Kevin joined the Conservation District. Today, he's going to be presenting on cover crops. And just like Amy said too, to remind you, you can raise your hand. Amy will open your mic, and you can also place your questions in the Q&A at the bottom. So thank you, Kevin, for presenting today. Take it away.
Okay, thank you. Good morning to everybody. So most of this talk is going to be on cover crops in general. I will tell you a little bit about how we got here. We originally got a SIG grant that allowed us to buy a used highboy interseeder. So the highboy is a very tall sprayer is what it used to be. And they took all the liquid stuff off of it and put a dry box onto it with a blower. And we just blow seed out on the ground through drop tubes. And so because of that, and again, I want to stay kind of off the interseeder and talk about cover crops in general more. But because of that, that's how we really got our feet wet, so to speak, in this arena. And also why I spent a lot of time in the field really diagnosing some of the problems that we saw. So even in this picture that you see here, you know, there's a strip kind of through the upper left-hand corner of it where things grew well. And the rest of the field, things didn't grow so well. And so, you know, most people would maybe look at that and move on and count it as something that worked or didn't work. But I tried to really dive into this a lot and try to figure out some of those reasons why. So I'll try to stick with that more so than just the interseeder. And if you have questions on the interseeder, we can get into that. We've had mixed results, and it's a tool in the toolbox, but it's certainly not something that we want to run out and do everywhere. So again, cover crops in the Northeast, you know, this is more along the lines of maybe some things that you're not hearing in other places that we figured out. I think I figured out anyway, some of the reasons why they may or may not grow very well in some of the results that people get out there and why they're happening. So as we dive into this, I had to update this a little bit. I haven't given this presentation in a year or so, and so some of what you see on the screen might be a little bit different, but I did try to update some of this. So obviously, not including this year, for the 5 years before that, we had record years of rainfall. 2020 was fairly dry, especially down here. 2022 now has been very dry, but the rest of those, the last 6 years, have been extremely wet. So that's meant delayed harvest of the cover crop, or I'm sorry, of the cash crop, which either meant delaying getting the cover crop in, or in our situation where we were interseeding, we would go on, you're supposed to go on like 2 weeks before they harvest to give the crop a little bit of a start. And we would go on and we would put the cover crop on, and then, you know, it got wet and they couldn't harvest for a month. And so it was under canopy for a lot longer. And that really hurt some of the results too. So we've struggled to get really good, consistent results for 1 year or another. And I've said 100 times since we started this whole project that everything the experts said would work hasn't, and everything that they said wouldn't work has. So I kind of have this presentation for anybody that wants it to at least talk about some of the things that are going on here in the Northeast. So the first year we started, again, we went in, we started actually in New York State. We had an agreement with Chemung to come up to New York State and do some acres up there. So we did about half in New York, half in Pennsylvania. New York wanted to get rolling a little earlier than what the experts would tell us to do. So we started here, my notes are we started August 5th, which would be way more than 2 weeks ahead of harvest, but we did it anyway. They wanted to get going. And we did it, and we had some, decent luck with most of those fields. I took a bunch of pictures in the fall. This is one of them. I'll show you a few others here in a minute. We had an establishment that was there that, next spring hopefully would come on and do well. Because we have a lot of no-till down here, and they still do a lot of tillage in New York State, in this particular instance anyway, I kind of messed up and didn't get up to New York State that spring early enough, and they were already plowing it under. But I heard from the guys from Chemung County that it had worked fairly well. So this was kind of an average field that we got. We had some pretty good fields in places. We got a decent radish coming on there with a lot of green stuff. And so we had some really good looking fields. This was kind of a base where, there was a little bit coming, but certainly if you're going to spend money on cover crops, you want it to look a whole lot better than what that does. And again, for time constraints, I'll fly through some of this. The interesting part about these two fields, again, I think it was our first year. You can see the far field does at least have some green into it. The close field has nothing in it. And this was a year where one of the things that we don't hear a lot about maybe is that sunlight, how big of a difference sunlight makes. And the only thing I could come up with these two fields was that the field facing north and south, at some point during the day, the sun would shine right directly down the row and it would get a little bit of sunlight. And we got some growth over there. This field closest to us ran east and west, and there was just no way to get any sunlight into the ground. And I think that made a pretty big difference. Not saying that obviously that we have to plant all our fields east and west. I'm just showing you how tricky and how hard it is sometimes to actually get a decent cover crop established. And that was one of the reasons. I didn't understand this at first. I talked with Mike Lovegreen. A lot of people probably on the call know Mike Lovegreen. He said, "Oh, I can tell you what's going on there." I'm like, "What's happening?" And he's like, "Well, the ground is so wet that the root is trying to find a place to grow where it's dry enough and it can get penetrated into the soil enough. And so in a wetland situation, this would actually become a hummock. So they would have a whole bunch of roots that would grow together and actually lift the plant up off the ground because it's so wet and the plant doesn't really want to grow there." So again, 2018, 2019, extremely wet, so wet, in fact, that, we even had plants that were, trying to almost form hummocks to try to grow where they couldn't. This is one of our more successful fields, but you can see where they harvested and where they left tracks. It killed everything out. Again, that's not what you would want. We heard that in drier years this wouldn't happen, and I believe that to be true now. But again, just the harvesting of that killed it out. Now, the one thing that we did do in this field is on the far left. This is a 120-foot strip. Our booms are 90 feet wide, so we had a little extra along the edge that we could not get. So he harvested the corn silage, and then he went in after the corn silage and planted this. So we planted ours. We went in with our high boy interseeder and put this on 2 or 3 weeks before harvest. He did this the way a traditional person would do it. And although you can't see much there, you can see a little bit here. So what you would have here is, with a high boy, if everything's working correctly, you get a good establishment. If you did it the normal way, you're just not going to get a lot of it. It's getting pretty late and there's just not a lot there. Weeds. Cover crops do not like weeds. For anybody that knows what that is, that is a weed that is going to completely burr cucumber, which is going to completely shade anything under it. Nothing grows under burr cucumber, and cover crops need sunshine, so even less of a chance that that's going to grow. So getting into some of the real interesting findings, we have a lot of no-till down here. And so this is a field that was really interesting. I took a picture of it At the time, I had no idea what was going on here. I think I have a little bit of an idea now, but it was really interesting to me that if you look closely here, there are 2 rows of corn. If you can see my cursor, this one is probably the current year's corn planting, and this row was the previous year. So we have seed that was broadcast on the ground that grew where there was a row of corn from last year and a row of corn from the year before, and almost nothing grew anywhere else in the field. I'll get into the reasons why here later, but again, it was just a kind of a mind-blowing thing as to why it's growing where the rows of corn are and not growing anywhere else. Soybean field, kind of the same thing. If you look real closely, obviously right in the rows, it grew really well. Between the rows, not so well. Fertility. I've been to a lot of meetings on this. I've worked with NRCS a lot in their soil health programs, and we've done a lot of rainfall simulators. We've went to a bunch of meetings. We've had internationally known speakers here, Gabe Brown, Dave Brandt, and all those guys. And of all the meetings I've ever went to, I've never heard anybody really say how much of a difference fertility makes. We've done a really good job in the Northeast because of the Chesapeake Bay and because of costs and not having extra manure in the area, of only putting on the land what the current cash crop needs. And because of that, if we're only putting on enough nutrients for the cash crop, guess what's left for the cover crop? Nothing. And so this was for instance, where you can see this V shape on the left where almost nothing is growing. That was where I got no extra nutrients. He took the soybeans off. We put the cover crop in, and that's what we got. And if you look at that, you'd say, okay, well, there's a cover crop there. It's probably preventing some erosion. It's maybe holding the soil together a little bit. I would think most people would kind of be wishy-washy as to whether that really was a successful seeding or not. In most people's eyes, maybe just barely. The rest of this field, he imported some biosolids, and they were put on actually midwinter. And so it was amazing that we got that much of a response out of them. But he put biosolids on and made sure they had plenty of nutrients. And this got so thick and so heavy that it was starting to go down. And a local dairy farmer actually approached him to harvest this as a crop that he could feed his cows, and the guy was willing to do that. But he certainly wouldn't have done that where it didn't get any nutrients. So I'll probably hit this a couple times, but again, in a lot of meetings I've been to, there has been absolutely almost no mention whatsoever of the fact that these crops need nutrients. As a matter of fact, I think NRCS and some of the other entities out there tell you, we'll pay for your cover crops if you put them in, but you can't put manure on them or you can't fertilize them. I'm here to argue with those people and say, if you don't, this is what you're going to get. And, if that's okay with you, with the people that are paying for it, then I guess we're okay with that. But if you want a true cover crop doing everything that it's supposed to do, it needs nutrients. And that is one of the biggest take homes that I've found in this whole trial. So again, another picture of where we put on biosolids, another field. It was just unbelievably thick. It's the greatest cover crop I've ever seen in my life. It was huge. This is 2 fields originally that was made into one field. You can see a dividing line down through the middle. One side was no-tilled into corn. One side was plowed the year before. I can't tell you which one's which. My only point here is that all these little teeny tiny things make a huge difference. And so one side was no-tilled, one side wasn't. One side grew better than the other. Again, I can't remember exactly which one was which. So in 2021, we had been going in with our interseeder, again, 2 or 3 weeks before when they thought they were going to harvest the crop. And that's kind of when we were told we were supposed to be going in. And then in 2021, well, in 19, we had a trial where the guy wanted us to go in and top dress nitrogen on his corn at the same time we put the cover crop down. And I said, yep, that sounds really cool. Let's try that. So we did it. We put this trial in, and that fall he went in and harvested the outside of this field for corn silage. And within 2 weeks, it just blew up, and we had the nicest looking cover crop you could ever want. And so it worked perfectly. And so in 2021, we thought, well, let's start trying to do that. Let's do a little bit more of that and see what works. So we did. So we did a number of it right on the Pennsylvania New York State border, and we got some fantastic results. This was probably average or maybe even below average. We had some really, really cool looking stuff, really heavy. Now, again, 2021, really wet. The corn was in hill ground. It wasn't the greatest corn in the world. It could get sunlight down to the ground, but we had some fantastic results that year. And so it worked. And so then we were really excited about what we were seeing. This is kind of a side note. I'm going to go completely a 180 right here real quick. But the other thing that I was a little bit disappointed in is we hear a lot about cover crops and holding the soil together. And we had some really great stuff that was coming in these fields. And so I was getting there right after we had 2 really super cold days in November. And then I was there about a week later. Where the cover crop was protected, it looked like this. Where it was not protected, it looked like that. I mean, it was cut in a third or maybe even less. And I'm sure it only went downhill from there. Again, another field protected, and just outside of it, not protected, it's almost gone. I don't want to, I mean, if everybody's having good luck with cover crops, that's great. And if they're lasting through and into spring, that's great. I just like to bring things up for food for thought. In some of these fields, I wonder, if we're seeing this in the fall, but by winter or even spring, we're seeing this, is it everything that we want to get out of it? So just kind of a 180. This is what, that hard frost freeze did to it, and it just wailed it. We had, again, this was knee high, almost waist high on some of this corn, huge radishes. There's some vetch in here. There's some rye. It looked fantastic. And then the next spring, I went and looked at this field, and it was almost completely gone. There's one of the radishes, just for instance. So really, really good stuff. It was easier to plant into, the guy said. So, we did get a few advantages out of it, but as far as just holding the soil together, I don't know. So again, for time's sake, we did seed in really late July. So this would have kind of been like we did in New York State the first year when we went in August. And we did get a decent take, especially where it could get sunshine. This was actually some really good corn, but the planter pass right here was a little further away than 30 inches. And so it could get some sunlight, and it looked really good. Where it didn't, it looked more like that. Again, time's sake, here's an opening, and it looked fantastic, but it does need sunshine. So getting into the variability, just to finish up, to actually get to what I'm here to speak on, is here was a field in Knoxville, Pennsylvania, on some pretty good ground down on the valley floor. And we had this in the same field as we had this. Now, again, this is not great, but it's better, and there's something there. And for time's sake, usually I ask what the differences are between these 2 pictures, but just because we don't have time, we won't do that. But this whole field was no-tilled, has been no-tilled for a long time. It did get manure, so it has some nutrients to it. But the difference in these 2 things, believe it or not, and again, I'm broadcasting seed on, I'm not putting it in the ground, is worm middings. So anybody that knows what worm middings are, you can see that where the worms have disturbed the soil and it's rough and the roots can get in, and maybe the seeds can get a little bit better soil to seed contact. They grew, and where the ground is super smooth and maybe arguably sealed off a little bit, and there's not a whole lot going on. And again, it's just a smooth top, nothing. So this is how tricky sometimes getting cover crops established can be. That's the only thing I can come up with. So some of the conclusions were, we can do this in the Northeast, and we can have some successful crops. In terms of the interseeder, we can't just, I think a lot of these meetings you go to, you can almost, they talk like you can just throw the seed out there and everything works. And I'm here to tell you that it doesn't. So in the Northeast, the things that I really want to hammer home to anybody on this show here is plant early. Now, this is going to mean different things to different people, But even with the interseeder, September consistently was just not going to do it. Even the ones that we planted in late July or early August did really well. Now you can only do that with a high boy interseeder, obviously. So if you don't have one of them, you're not going to get it done. In a year like this, being dry, I shut the thing down completely. We did 1 or 2 trials at the very beginning of the year. It was so dry that I wouldn't even go out and do anymore. So in a dry year, again, it's a tool in the toolbox. It's not going to work at all. That's not exactly what we're here to talk about today, but you do need to plant this early in order to have any chance of getting things done. We're trying to plant and grow a crop in a time of the year where crops aren't supposed to grow. They just aren't. So that's already 1 strike against you. So I use this in the baseball terminology. You've got 1 strike against you before you even start. There has to be available nutrients there for the crop to grow. There has to be. If you do not have available nutrients for that, it's not going to do well. So that's strike 2 if we're using the baseball analogy. Strike 3, if you're not going to do any kind of tillage. Now, obviously, no till is tillage, right? You're just tilling the rows. So that would work. But I have found, and I hate to even say this in front of a lot of people, but I have found that putting the seed on first and then doing a really light disking or vertical tillage pass, or even doing the vertical tillage first and then putting the seed on, believe it or not, is even better than no till. And of course, you can go a lot faster. So a little bit of tillage, again, just to disturb that soil, like where the worm mittings were and where they weren't. If you can just break that crust up just a little bit on top, even a no-till, makes a huge difference. Cover crops do not like wet feet. And these wet years that we've had, I can show you pictures where even on some really nice pope soil, on the valley floors, the higher areas where it stayed a little bit drier, just little short knolls, the knolls would be growing fairly well, and down in the low spots there wouldn't be anything. And in the hill ground where it's just wet soil to begin with, it's just another strike against you. So they do not like wet feet. You have to be a little bit aware of your spray program, but I will tell you that the one that we did 2 years ago was a pretty heavy rate of Halix GT, I think, with a little extra atrazine. And we did that at knee high or a little taller. So it was early in the season and we had great success. So it will work in areas where we didn't really think that it was going to. Craig Williams is a Penn State extension guy down here, and he actually is going in and broadcasting on in the middle of the winter. And he's actually having some pretty good luck with that. So for anybody that might be interested in doing something like that, he's having great luck with it. Now, you're not going to get anything out of it, obviously, in the fall, but next spring when the rains start and everything is growing well enough that he's getting some really good soil health benefits to it. He's getting some erosion reduction from it, and he's actually harvested some of those fields, both for silage and for grain. I know he's harvested them for grain a couple times. So maybe winter application is something that we can look more into for some of these people. And it seems to establish maybe even better than it does because of the freezing and thawing in the ground, maybe even establishing better than doing it late in the year if you get too late. I just threw on the rainfall amount. So, the last 5 years, this didn't include 2022, we're averaging 48 inches of rain, and normally we average 37. So we're talking just a lot more rain. And if you don't have a cover crop, my poster child picture, this was a series of strips coming down off a side hill. The cornfield you can see here has a really nice cover crop planted in it. The soybeans, because soybeans are harvested later and there's not enough time to get anything established in it, the soybean fields look like this. And so we should have had a picture uphill from this, but every strip of corn looked exactly like this. There was zero erosion, and every strip of soybeans looked just like this. And when this strip of soybeans hit the next strip of corn, it completely stopped. There was no erosion. Everything was exactly the way you wanted to see it. And as soon as it dropped into the next strip of soybeans, it looked just like that again. So that's all of it. Again, just to highlight really quickly again for why we may see things working in the Northeast or not working, that we found that's different than maybe some of the other meetings you've went to is it has to get sunlight. So if it's not going to get sunlight, it's not going to work very good. Moisture, obviously, if it's really super dry, you're going to struggle to get something on. And in those years where it was super wet, Again, cover crops do not like wet feet. They do not like to be in saturated soil, and you're really going to struggle to get anything to grow. Tillage makes a huge difference. I think, I don't know if Jerry's on here, I apologize for not remembering what his last name is, but he was from up around the lake somewhere. I think they bought an interseeder and they weren't interseeding. They were just blowing the seed on the ground, and the guys were making a vertical till pass either before or after that. And I believe if he's on here, he can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they're having really good luck with that. So tillage goes a long ways. Timing, again, make sure it's early enough to get something established. And the one that I really, really want to hit home with again is fertility. If you're just putting enough nutrients on that crop just for the cash crop preceding the cover crop is really going to establish. So again, back to the baseball thing, strike one is it's too wet. Strike two is you didn't get it in time, and strike three is you didn't do any tillage. You're not going to have a cover crop. It did go to Lancaster last year to do some cover crop down there late season. And again, I would just sum it up by saying very variable results, and they're struggling down there. They tried to do it the opposite way we did. They were trying to actually put it in at knee high. Their corn yields so much that it wouldn't grow well enough through the year, so they didn't have anything at the end of the year. So they wanted to use the interseeder to go in 2 or 3 weeks before they harvest to try to get established that way, and still very variable results. So I know even a lot of the guys down there are really struggling to come up with an easy fix for this. So again, I hope you got a little bit of information out of it. I tried to go fast, but there's a lot of reasons why this isn't working in the Northeast. So if we can fix some of these, I think we can have a lot better shot at getting some decent cover crops established. So with that, I can take questions if there are any.
As of right now, Kevin, we don't have anything in the Q&A. Does anyone have a question they'd like to ask directly to Kevin? Just raise your hand, use that raise hand feature, and I'll open up your microphone. Oh, okay, here we go. Go ahead, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Hey, Kevin. Yeah, this is Wei Xinzu from Binghamton University. As a professor, I know nothing about your planting, so I'm really ignorant. So ignore and forgive but other folks from USC probably know me, and I don't think I have speak to you before. I'm also on the Chesapeake Bay program and the stack. And again, I just try to be an expert there, but really admit a lot of things I do not know. So clearly from your short presentation, from my side is one, you think cover crop is really important, as actually showing the picture here. Second, cover crop, because it's seeded annually, you have a lot of challenge. One thing I can think about from your presentation is in the North Country, and I think I really like to focus on the USC area. So it's the northern end of the Chesapeake Bay. So from Chesapeake Bay program, you probably face the most challenge because winter can be cold and wet.
Yep.
And I understand that because the precipitation is about the same. In the winter, you still get the precipitation either in rain or snow, but because of evapotranspiration is low, so your soil is definitely wet. Doing soil, I know that. So I never think you will ever have a drought issue in the winter, in the non-growing season, typical non-growing season, but you can have too wet. And so I think in conclusion, if I can bring that to the Chesapeake Bay program, is we need a lot of technical support, scientific study of how to establish a cover crop. And can you do some perennial plant, like more from the erosion perspective, like along the stream? Because if the erosion happens, you have to stop them somewhere before they get into the creek. Yeah, you're nodding your head. I also have some understanding. I just shoot my guess here. I noticed your early and the presentation showing some of the cover crop plant grown better along the crop, like the corn. I suspect it's because of corn and all the soybean, because they are well-established root system. So they loosen the soil a little bit. So your cover crop actually get a better chance to use the previous crop's root system and the less compact soil. because away from the crop roots, the soil can be quite compacted, and so it's difficulty for the root of the cover crop to establish. I don't know whether my guess is correct or you agree with that.
Yeah, so it sounds like your main question is, can a perennial be used? We're getting close to time, so I'm sorry to cut you off. I just want to make sure that we're being cognizant of
Sure,
folks'
I'm
time.
sorry. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
no problem. Kevin, is that something that is an option to have a perennial rather than an annual?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, to my knowledge, at this point in time, no. Although I will say at the home farm, they have at one point in time used a cover crop of clover, and apparently with certain spray programs, at least with their spray program, it does not completely kill clover. And so what happens is that clover, by the time they harvest it, I should take a picture and put it in this presentation, but by the time they harvest that corn, that clover has started to come back in already. And so it does cover the ground. So once it's off, it's really short. It's only just a couple inches, but it has a good coverage. And so I've been very impressed with the way that is. So yeah, they're actually, they'll plant corn, they spray it, the clover kind of goes away, the corn grows really well. And then by the end of that season, if it can get any light at all, that clover starts already coming back in. And so once they remove that cash crop, it's already there. The other quick thing, again, I know we're short on time, is I've also thrown out the idea of winter annuals. Most people look at winter annuals as a weed, but if you don't want to fight Mother Nature, why do we not look into winter annuals? Why would we not plant something that as soon as we harvest the corn, it starts growing and it grows all winter long. And then by the time you plant corn again, it's been through its entire life cycle. And because it's through its entire life cycle, it's dying as we're putting the corn in. So then the corn grows without that. And then again, the next winter, that whole system starts over again. So I'm really curious as to winter annuals, if that's something we could do with those. But yes, with his questions, cover crops are extremely important. We really need to figure out how to get them in there. And we have a huge amount of challenges here.
Absolutely. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for joining us. And I just wanted to share what's happening next week. So like normal with our Watershed Wednesdays, we do our quick half an hour micro session. And next week, we're going to learn about the New York State Climate Act forestry strategies and next steps. So Molly will be presenting, so please join us. But if you have any questions for Kevin that we're not able to take a look at today, please just let us know and we'll make sure that he gets them so he can give you the answer. But we thank you for joining us and hope that you have a wonderful day, everybody.
Yep, thank you. Let me know if you have questions.
Thank you.